Okay. Oh my gosh. Hey, so today we are in this two-part series, kind of mini-series called This or That. Like Jeff said, we're looking at the Beatitudes. And this is kind of where Jesus was saying, listen, this is what you've been taught, and this is what the world says, but this is what I say. So you can go with this, you can go with what I say, or you can go with what the world says. And the Beatitudes, this is the introduction, this is the beginning of the Sermon on the Mount. So I want to encourage you, maybe this week, next week is going to be Corey, I want to encourage you to maybe open up and read some of the Sermon on the Mount so you can kind of see where Jesus was kind of going with all of this. Because the Sermon on the Mount is kind of like, it's kind of like Jesus' inauguration speech. It's kind of like him proclaiming for the first time, like, this is what I'm all about. This is the things that I believe. This is the things that I want you to do. And so the Beatitudes, this is the introduction to all of that. And so I've been excited to preach this sermon. I've known about this sermon for a long time. We knew that this is what we were going to do in December. And so I've got notes written down everywhere. When I was getting ready to kind of piece it together, I was going through all my jacket pockets and pulling out all these notes. And I sat down, and I knew what I wanted to do, and I struggled with kind of how to introduce it. I kind of struggled with the beginning and what to do. And then I had this weird experience. And it was kind of my answer to how do I introduce the introduction to the three greatest chapters in the Bible. And so a few weeks ago, I got to partake in this really weird thing. My kids are all playing basketball. All three of them will be playing in 3 different leagues, and Pax is in. So if you guys need to get a hold of me, just come to the elementary school tonight, because I feel like we're going to be there all the time. So Pax is in 3rd and 4th grade. They needed some coaches, and so I texted Lincoln and said, hey, I'll coach. Like, let's co-coach together. That way, I don't have to do it by myself. He doesn't have to do it by himself. And so we signed up to coach, and this might be like normal, like Licking Valley stuff if you've coached Licking Valley before. Like I've coached soccer. I was on the board when you sign up for soccer. We just kind of met for a half hour, quickly made up the teams. Basketball, not NBA, Licking Valley basketball is totally different. And I don't know if it was this weird for Lincoln or anybody else, but what you do is, like, we go to the gym this Saturday morning, this one Saturday, and all the kids come in, like 80 kids, and they've all got like numbers on their back, and they're all there, and then they set all the coaches at like a table, like on the sidelines, like we're like American Idol judges, and we sat there, and we had papers in front of us with all the kids' names, and then they made these 3rd and 4th grade boys like do a layup while everybody's watching. Shoot, take a shot, run down, pass the ball. Basically, we were sitting there kind of just evaluating these kids. And I'm sitting there thinking, gosh, I don't know under that kind of pressure if I could make a layup. Just knowing like all 80 other kids are watching, all the coaches are watching, parents are there. And these kids are going, and any time they missed a layup, we had the list, and you just see everybody reach down and cross out or put a little X next to their name. And I felt terrible because I felt like every time we did that, we're like, oh, you suck, I don't want you on my team. And then the kids go back to the line, and I'm like, so when they missed it, I wanted to be like, no, it's okay, I might take you, it's okay. Like, don't look at us because we're all making marks next to your name. It was really weird. I don't know if it was as weird for Lincoln, but I just sat there and I was like, I started putting X's next to the name before it even started. And the guy next to me, the coach next to me was like, why are you crossing off those kids? And for me, I was crossing off all the kids that were flossing. Do you know what flossing is? Like when they should have been listening and they were doing like the dumbest dance I've ever seen. If you guys don't know what flossing is, talk to Angie Badiger. Okay? Ask Angie. That was the meanest inside joke ever. But ask Angie Badiger about flossing. So it was just this really, really weird experience. And the reason I tell you this story is because like when we get done, we all go back into a room, just the coaches, and we have this draft. And I was just kind of looking around, and I realized like everybody has these papers, and on the papers you have the kids that you want. And then there's kind of everybody else. Like there's the two groups, like you got the kids that you really want to make sure you draft, and then there's kind of just the other kids, the kids that had the skill, the kids that maybe didn't possess the skill as much. And I got thinking about it, and I've been thinking about the past couple weeks as I was kind of working on this, that we always kind of have that separation, as not just in sports, but into life, that we kind of split ourselves up into two groups. You've got the haves, and then you've got the have-nots. The haves, you guys know the haves. The haves, like everything just works out for them. They experience good things. Their income is good. They've got a good house, a good job, a good family. They just kind of got everything. And we look at people like this and we say, man, they are so blessed, right? Look how blessed they are. That they just got such a nice family. Everything they just look so nice. They're just so blessed. And then there's everybody else. Then there's the have-nots, the cotton-headed ninny-muggins, the ones that maybe things don't always work out. And this has been this way probably for all of humanity. You see, I think that we have a tendency that when we read the Bible and we know that like when it talks about Jesus, talking to the people, and we think of the people and we think, oh, they're so much different. It was probably so much easier in the Bible times. They got to experience Jesus, and it was just a different time back then. But the people that Jesus spent time with, and the people that Jesus was teaching and talking to, they had the same struggles as you and I. Just trying to make enough money to make ends meet, just trying to raise their kids the right way, just trying to be a good spouse, just trying to do the right thing. And even back then, there were people that had it all. There was the people that was part of the have group, the people that still had good jobs, the people that made more money than everybody else, the people that just it seemed like everything seemed to work out for them. And back then, people believed something kind of crazy. Because they believed that if you fell in this category, that you were part of the haves and that everything worked out for you and you were blessed because you had so many good things, they believed that you must be good with God. The reason why you fell into this category is because God is smiling down on you. The reason why you're so blessed is that God must like you more than he likes other people. It's crazy, right? We don't believe that. We don't have a televangelist with big white shiny teeth that likes to stand up on stage and say, be good and good things will happen. And we don't think in ourselves when things go right for us that, man, I must really be doing good stuff. I must really be, going to church enough. You see, that's called karma. And as much as sometimes we wish that karma existed, it doesn't. And the problem is when we think this way, that the reason good things happen is because we're doing good, that also means that we have to believe that the opposite of this is true. Because if you believe good things happen because you're a good person, then you have to believe that the people that fell into the have-not category, well, they must be in that category because of something they've done. It must be something about their life that's causing all these bad things to happen. You see, if you were poor, if you were sick, if you were an outsider, maybe if certain things happened to you, whether it was your fault or somebody else's fault, if you were unimportant, then people believed that there must be something in your life. There must be something you're doing that's causing all this. Because people back then, and probably even some of you, when things go wrong, you start to think, the mess of my life, the lack of goodness in my life, it's probably in some kind of direct correlation with God's opinion of me. Like when bad things happen, I know sometimes our mind goes to, oh gosh, God must really hate me. Or Or God must look at me, and it's like those coaches sitting on the sidelines putting an X next to our name and saying, oh, you suck. I don't want you on my team. And we think, there's got to be something I'm doing in my life to be able to deserve this. You see, this was the belief in the days of the Bible, and this is kind of the belief we have now, because even back then, religious authorities, and there were certain religious people that preached this. And you can find a story of Jesus that Jesus and his disciples were walking and they come across the blind man, this guy that had been blind all of his life. And the disciples say, Jesus, who sinned? Did his parents sin and that caused him to be blind? Or was there something he did in his life and then that caused him to be blind? And Jesus looks at him and says, you've got it all wrong. Like, that's not the way that life works. And so Jesus, he's been teaching. And as he teaches, the people that are following him because they like what he has to say. He's not like the other religious authorities. He's not like the other religious people. See, because the people that were following Jesus were primarily the have-nots. They would fall in that category where everything wasn't really working out for them. And you can actually read about some of these people that would have been following Jesus. You can learn about them in history books because they had a specific name. You see, several hundred years before Jesus, there was a group of people that was called the Assyrians. The Assyrians, they were this powerful army, and it just seemed like everywhere they went, they just conquered and they took over. And they would go into a city, and they would completely just wipe out the city, take over the army, and then they would take the Jewish people slaves. So if you read the Old Testament, think like Daniel in the lion's den, Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego. All these stories were people that were captured by the Assyrians. But what they did, they didn't take everybody. They would go in and they would conquer the army. They would take over the city, but they wouldn't take everybody in the city as slaves. I don't know how they did it, if they lined them up, but in some way it was kind of like that bad phys ed class where they go down the line and they say, I want you, and I want you. And they would take the people that they chose into captivity, and they would be their slaves. They would take the ones that had something to offer them. They would look at them and say, oh, you're strong. You're skilled, you're educated, you're smart, you're really good in this area, you're beautiful. They would take all the people that we would look at and say, well, they're blessed. And they say, we want you to come back with us. You're going to be our slaves. And those people that didn't get picked, they just kind of stayed there. They just took everybody off, left the people behind that they didn't want, saying, you guys have no worth to us. You guys are useless to us. And they just left them there in the city to continue life. You know, all their neighbors are gone and maybe half their family's gone, and they're just kind of left there in the city. This is a side note, but as I'm talking about this, oftentimes what would happen is the Assyrians, some of them would say, you know what, I think I'm just going to stay here. I think I want to live in this city. Like, this is a nice city. There's lots of houses. We took everybody from their houses as slaves. I'm just going to stay here, and my family's just going to live here. These people eventually became known as the Samaritans. So when you're reading the Bible and you're like, why does everybody hate the Samaritans? Like, why are the Jews so mean to the Samaritans? It's because this is who they were. These were the ones that kind of left, that kind of stayed in the cities and took over. But going back to the people, I mean, how many of you ever at one time or another were like last picked for sports? Anybody? It's actually a lot of you guys. You better not ever have a church softball team. No, I mean, I've been there, but I don't know how your self-confidence is. I don't know how thick your skin is, but like, how much does it sting to not even be chosen for the slave team? Like, how bad do you have to be for them to say, you know what, stay here. I don't even want you as one of my slaves. Like, you're okay. And you see, there was a Hebrew word for these people. The Hebrew word for the people left behind is Anawim. Say it. Say Anawim. And that's a Hebrew word, and it's translated as the throwaway people. But by the time Jesus came a few hundred years later, this word Anawim, it kind of gradually took on more of a different meaning, and it became a cuss word, kind of this curse word that means the crap of the earth. Oh, no, it's not up there. That's okay. And it kind of just became this really demeaning, derogatory word that you are nothing but the worst thing I could think of the earth. This is what I put up on there. Okay. And I wasn't going to put it up there, but I know that there are some people that see that pop up on the screen and they say, you can't put that up there in church. Like this isn't the place for that. And I kind of want you to think that, because this is the way that the people that were considered Anawim, when they would go into places, primarily like religious places, people would look at them and say, you can't be here. Like, there is way too much stuff that you've done wrong and too much stuff in your past. Like, you can't be in this place. Like, they would go into temples and people would look at them and say, nah, I don't think so. This isn't the place for you. See, they would say, you're Anawim. You don't deserve to be here. And Paul says in 1 Corinthians 4:13, he says, I used to have a great reputation. And he said, I started following Jesus. And he says, and I became the scum of the earth. He kind of cleans it up a little bit. But what he's saying is, when I started following Jesus, I became Anawim. Like, people looked down on me. People treated me bad because of me following Jesus. And so Jesus comes on the scene. And there's these people that have been told, God has no use for you. Like, you don't really fit into society. You're probably even a lot of people, their own family kind of turned their back on them. And there's these people, these throwaway people, the crap of the earth people, the Anawim. And they start to follow Jesus. No matter what they have in their past, and being told that they are nothing but garbage. I mean, have you guys ever felt like that? I mean, how many times have you looked in the mirror and you look back at yourself and you say, man, just a piece of Anawim. You know, we've all had that moment, and I'm sure that some of you are in it now. And I mean, you can think back when I talked about being last picked. I mean, think back to elementary school. Everybody lines up and you get picked last or you don't get picked at all. And that feeling you have, that's the feeling of like, man, I am just garbage. I'm Anawim. And in middle school, high school, I know that people say, man, this is the greatest moments of your life. High schoolers, it's not the greatest moments of your life. Don't listen to stupid adults that say this is the greatest moment of your life, like the greatest time. It's not. Because we all look back at middle school and high school and you get that weird feeling as you're like, you spent so much time comparing yourself to others and the way people treated you. And you have that feeling where you're like, man, I don't measure up. I feel like Anawim. When you screw up and that shame you feel, or when you get fired from a job or you get let go for whatever reason, when you look in the mirror and all you see is the shame and the scars and the guilt and the failure and the fear and all the insecurities that you have in your life, and you look at yourself and you say, gosh, I just feel like Anawim. You see, the world hasn't changed. We deal with this, and this is what the people that were following Jesus were dealing with too. These were the things that they were struggling with. Matthew 5, this is kind of the beginning of the Sermon on the Mount. It says that when Jesus saw the crowds, he went up on the mountainside, and he sat down, and he began to teach. See, the Sermon on the Mount, even scholars say that this is the most influential talk that's ever been given. This was Jesus launching a movement. This was Jesus saying, from now on, everything's going to be different. From now on, I need you to change your thinking. I need to change the way that you see the world. And Jesus sits down, and all these people gather around him. These people that are told that they're not good enough. These people that have just been treated like dirt their entire life. And they sit down, And they gather around to listen to what he has to say. And with the very first sentence of what we refer to as the Beatitudes, he knocks religion on its butt. He changes everybody's way of thinking. This way of thinking of where people say, well, God must have blessed you because of all these good things in your life. And look at how Jesus starts the Beatitudes. He says, blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. If you were to translate poor in spirit, what do you think he was saying? He said, blessed are the starts with an A. He said, blessed are the Anawim. Blessed are those that are treated like dirt. Blessed are those that are the lowest of the low, because yours is the kingdom of heaven. He says, from now on, everything is going to be different. He starts out the Sermon on the Mount. He starts out with the Beatitudes with probably one of the most earth-shattering statements he could say to this group of people. Saying, guys, I've got good news for you. You are blessed because you are Anawim. There are no throwaway people in the kingdom of God. He said, I've come to make this available to everybody, but especially the Anawim, especially you guys that feel like you're the lowest of the low. I am here, and you are blessed because of me. And he continues. He says, oh, you think you're blessed by God because of all the stuff that you have? Like, you think that you're blessed by God because of all these good things that are happening? He says, listen to this. And he continues, and he says, blessed are those who mourn, for you will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for you'll inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. This is probably the toughest one, but blessed are you when people insult you, persecute you, and falsely say all kinds of evil against you because of me. Rejoice and be glad, because great is your reward in heaven. The band is going to come up. But as they come up, I want you to think, knowing this group of people that were sitting and listening to these words, I mean, what do you think was going through their head? What kind of emotions do you think they were feeling when they heard this very first sentence out of his mouth? I picture a lot of the people weeping. I picture a lot of the people cheering. Just being excited that, oh my gosh, finally there's a place for us. Because all their life they've been told that they are nothing. All their life they've been told that they are nobodies. And I'm sure at some point they were beginning to believe it. That their ancestors were it was this embarrassing group of people that didn't even get chosen to be slaves. And then their children were just all kind of carried this stigma around. Their ancestors were Anawim. They were Anawim. Probably their kids were going to grow up to just be this kind of outcast. And Jesus knows this, and the first thing out of his mouth is, blessed are the Anawim, for the kingdom of heaven is available to you. That's like earth-shattering. I mean, it just blew up in their face, and they said, this is amazing. And I bet if I asked today how you categorize yourself, I think a lot of you would say, I kind of feel like a have-not. Or I'm kind of in a season in my life where I feel like Anawim. And Jesus is saying, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how rejected you are. It doesn't matter what you've done or what's been done to you. It doesn't matter how you feel or what you think you have to offer. It doesn't matter what you've lost. It says God doesn't hate you. God wants you to be a part of his life. And when Jesus came on the scene, there were these people, these outcasts, but then there was also people that were stressed out and they were worn out and they were tired because they were trying so hard to please God. They thought, if I could just please God enough, if I could just do the right things in my life, then maybe I could be blessed too. Then maybe I could have stuff. And they were so busy trying to be good in order to have good things happen to them that they were just totally missing the point. And later in Matthew 11:28, Jesus says, "Come to me, all who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." He says, stop playing the game. Stop trying to please God because you're just wearing yourself out and it's so overwhelming. See, I call it putting on because we do this, I call it putting on our Sunday best. I grew up going to church. My parents made us dress up. I thought it was stupid. I still think it's stupid today. We had to always wear our nicest clothes. We don't do that here, but I still think we do our Sunday best because we walk in, we put on that smile on our face, and people say, "Hey, how's it going?" And you're like, "It's great. It's really good. I mean, it's not been a sucky week at all. Like God is good." And really inside we're struggling and we're tired and we're stressed out, and all week we've been crying out to God, "God, why are you allowing this to happen in my life?" And we show up here and all of a sudden everything's okay because we need to put on our face and show that we're good. The Message version of Matthew 11:28, Jesus says, "Are you tired? Are you worn out? Are you burned out on religion? Then come to me, get away with me, and you'll recover your life. I'll show you how to do it. Just take a real rest. Walk with me and work with me. Watch how I do it and learn the unforced rhythms of grace. I won't lay anything heavy or ill-fitting on you. Just keep company with me, and you'll learn to live freely and lightly." And Jesus invited those people on the mountain that sat and listened to those things he had to say. He invited them to follow him. And he invited the people that were so tired and worn out of trying to please God, he invited them to follow him. And all the people that had reason after reason as to why there is no way God would ever want anything to do with me, Jesus looks at them and says, "I want you to follow me." And we have that same invitation today. We have that same invitation every Sunday. And I know that some of you sit there week after week in the chairs, and this time comes and you say to yourself, "Jesus, there is no way. Like, where would I even begin? Like, don't I need to do this and this and this?" And Jesus says, "Just stop and follow me." Like, we sit there and we say, "Jesus, I need to have all this figured out. Like, there is still some serious stuff in my life. Like, I'm still struggling. I might even be addicted to some stuff." And Jesus says, "I know. Stop. Just come. Hang out with me. Growth. It takes time. Follow me and see how I do the things. Follow me and see the way that I see other people." Hopefully, by spending time with me and seeing how I look at other people, maybe you can start to see other people the way that I do. Maybe someday you'll be able to see the way that I see people, that you can look in the mirror at yourself and you can see the way that Jesus sees you. Because you're not Anawim. You're not the throwaway garbage of the earth people. No matter what you've done and no matter what you believe about yourself, no matter what other people believe about you, God is saying, "You are my child." And that's never going to change. Honestly, for a lot of you, I think the one thing that's standing in the way of you following Jesus is you. And all the things that the excuses you're making and all the things in your life, and you're saying there's no way. And Jesus is saying, "Stop and follow me." If you have a decision, I want to encourage you, make today the day that you decide that you're going to follow Jesus. Make today the day that you decide that you're going to start spending more time with Jesus. And it's a learning process. You're not going to change right away, but you're going to start working. You're going to start seeing the way Jesus sees, and you're going to start treating people and loving the people the way that Jesus loves, and you're going to start loving yourself the way that Jesus loves you. Let's stand as we close and sing.